Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. Today I will be talking about the Philadelphia 76ers and specifically how they basically have been botching their future and all their trade assets and their window for being a title contender. So if you're unfamiliar, Philly recently just got bounced in the first round of the playoffs by Boston in a clean sweep, and they really weren't competitive in much of that series. And a lot of people contribute that to Ben Simmons not being on the team because he was injured, so he didn't play in any of the games, and so that really hurt them quite a bit. But besides that, they just in general haven't really been playing up to expectations this past season, and I think, in all honesty, it goes beyond that to earlier times on the team, like 3, 4, 5 years back, even. So, if we first review the team, I think it all starts in 2013 when they committed to starting the process. So, in 2013, Philly traded Jrue Holiday for the number 6 pick, which netted them Nerlens Noel in the draft. Nerlens Noel was actually basically the top prospect in that draft, but because of injury concerns, he dropped to number 6. And so Philly got him, and they were kind of promising in that they thought he was going to be a really cornerstone piece of their team going forward. He missed all of his rookie year due to injury, and because of that, Philly was basically really bad because they didn't have many good players, and they were like, hey, if we're going to be this bad, let's just basically tank for another high draft pick. They got the number 3 pick in 2014, and they picked Joel Embiid with that. And again, he was a big man who had injury concerns from Kansas. If not, he would have been like the number 1 pick, but because of the injury concerns, he dropped to 3. And again, he missed his entire rookie season. So 2014 to 15 season, they had Nerlens Noel, who played all right in his first year. He, I think, averaged like 8 rebounds a game and like 11 points and 2 blocks, so he was okay. 2015, they still were a very bad team, and again, they had a really high pick, the number 3 pick, and this year they picked Jahlil Okafor, who was a center from Duke who had played really well and was a really promising young dude who was a really great low post scorer. And so for the 3rd straight year, they had picked a center who was pretty good, and this year they had Embiid again miss the entire season, but the difference was that Okafor was the first rookie in this whole process to actually play his rookie year. And if you don't remember, Jahlil Okafor actually played pretty well and was in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. He averaged 17 points a game, 8 rebounds, and shot like 47% from the field. So that's not great for a center, but he was still at least like the one promising piece they had on this team. Going into the next draft, they were again really bad because they still didn't have Embiid, and they picked Ben Simmons with the number 1 overall pick in 2016. And he again, like their previous 2 of their 3 top picks, missed his entire rookie year. But they had Embiid finally, who was able to at least play 30 games for the team. They still had Nerlens Noel and Okafor, and this got really complicated because it was quite a logjam, as you can expect, with 3 centers all being high draft picks and expecting major playing time. What they did basically was convert, or not convert, but put Nerlens Noel at power forward whenever he played with the other 2. And whenever they played Embiid and Okafor together, they put Okafor at the power forward. But again, that was really bad for spacing because none of those guys were great outside shooters. Okafor had some mid-range. Embiid could shoot threes okay, not great, and Nerlens Noel had no spacing. So that after that season, I believe, is when they got rid of Nerlens Noel, and they then traded Jahlil Okafor going into the 2017 season. I believe they traded him to the Nets. So they got rid of both of those dudes. I think it was either during the 2017 offseason or during the 2017-18 season, because really by that point neither of them were playing much at all. They also finally had this guy Dario Saric come over from Europe to play for them, who had been drafted, I believe, in 2013, so way back, or 2014. So after 3 seasons of not playing, or maybe it was 2, but he came over and started playing, and playing pretty well actually. Like between 10 to 13 points a game on really good three-point shooting. So he was a solid piece for them. 2017 to 18, Joel Embiid finally plays like a good number of games, and Ben Simmons actually plays after missing his full rookie season. So at this point, your 2013 and 15 really high draft picks, Noel and Okafor, are gone. But you have Embiid finally, after 3 seasons of playing a collective 30 games, he's actually like playing for real. And Ben Simmons, after 2016 not really playing at all, he's finally playing as well. And then your number 1 overall pick from that draft, Markelle Fultz, in the 2017 draft, he played like 6 games for the team and missed the rest of the season. So the first round pick train just keeps on going with them, like always missing their rookie year. But at this point, they were like a good team. They won 52 games, and they were the 3 seed, and they did pretty well because they had also made an acquisition of JJ Redick, and they had Robert Covington, who had been on the team for a long time. And so they had Redick, Covington, and Saric in the starting lineup with Embiid and Simmons, which was pretty solid because that was like 3 sharpshooters with 2 dudes who couldn't really shoot, but it created enough spacing to be effective. And then they had also Ersan Ilyasova and Marco Bellinelli off the bench, who were also very good shooters. So your basic rotation was like 5 good shooters with 2 non-shooters. So you had decent spacing actually still. Going into the next season, they let Bellinelli and Ilyasova walk in free agency. And besides that, basically they had the same team coming back and hopefully a healthy Markelle Fultz. He basically wasn't healthy, and so he was playing really weird too, and people basically thought like, oh, he's a complete bust. So they traded him to Orlando for, I believe, James Ennis, who is basically like, maybe it wasn't James Ennis, but no, it was Jonathan Simmons, who is basically like a backup small forward or shooting guard. And he's alright, but probably was not worth trading a number 1 pick for. But they were just trying to get whatever salvageable value they could for him. Then the major move for Philly came in that they traded cap space and a rookie shooting guard, Landry Shamet. They traded that for Tobias Harris mid-year. And actually before that, they traded Robert Covington and Dario Saric for Jimmy Butler. So basically, they had this rookie Landry Shamet, who was a pretty good outside shooter. And then they had Dario Saric, Robert Covington, and Bellinelli and Ilyasova, and so that's 5 pretty good outside shooters to help space with Ben and Joel, and they traded or released or just didn't re-sign those 5 guys. And so they basically traded all that spacing for Jimmy Butler, who's an okay outside shooter, and Tobias Harris, who actually is a really good outside shooter. Either way, you're really reducing your playable guys in that you basically went from what could have been like a really, really solid 8-man rotation down to basically about 5 guys who you actually trust, and they're all in your starting lineup. They actually did really well in the second round. They pushed Toronto to 7 games, but it didn't work out, as at the last second Toronto won that series. Going into the next year, Jimmy was a free agent, and they actually offered him a max contract, but they apparently offended him in how they offered it. They told him, like, we'll give you the max if you're willing to control yourself, and he was like, what is that supposed to mean? Like I'm some sort of like creature that has to be controlled or something. So he got offended. He left for Miami, and they re-signed Tobias Harris to the max, which is more than a lot of people thought he deserved, because I think on average he's making like $35 million a year now, which is a lot for a dude who hasn't even been an all-star. And then they also, in the wake of Jimmy leaving, they were like, well, we still have all this cap space to use on somebody. So they signed free agent Al Horford, 5-time All-Star, but also 34 years old, to a 4-year max contract for like an annual salary of like $34-35 million. But on paper, people said, hey, you know, they lost Jimmy, but they got Josh Richardson back for him because they did a sign and trade. And last year for the Heat, he averaged like 16 points per game on good efficiency. And then they said, hey, they lost JJ Redick, who, by the way, also left in free agency. But they brought in Al Horford. So they basically lost 2 good rotation guys and brought in 2 good rotation guys. And they were like, hey, Al Horford's a really good shooting 3-point guy for being a center. So it'll be fine that they lost spacing in Redick. And the truth of the matter is that Horford was a good spacer for a center, but at power forward, where you're expected to be a lot better of a spacer, he was like average to mediocre, because the expectations for spacing at center are way lower than they are at power forward, which has become like a 3-point sniper position kind of nowadays. So Horford just being average at shooting was kind of a letdown. Going into this year, Josh Richardson is no Jimmy Butler, so that hurt them. And Al Horford, who was primarily looked at as basically like a floor spacer along with some good defense, he still was okay at defense, but his shooting is nowhere near JJ Redick level. So they basically didn't. They had sold it like they were basically bringing in 2 good guys for losing 2 good guys, but the guys that they lost were much better than the guys that they got back. And so basically you had this core tied up with all your cap space of these 5 guys of Simmons, Richardson, Harris, Horford, and Embiid, because besides Richardson, all those other guys are making the max now. So that's basically your whole roster combined with minimum salary guys. So if you had to go back and do revisionist history, what would have improved this team? To me, keeping Jimmy Butler would have been good, and keeping Redick would have been good. And I don't know if it was just how they handled Jimmy Butler that they shouldn't have offended him and how they offered the contract, but they had the money to give both him and Harris the max. They should have just done that, because honestly at this point Jimmy Butler's a much more valuable player than Al Horford is. And they basically said, we're good, we can still bring in Al Horford, which was a bad decision. So to me, that's really one of the main things. And also, in all honesty, if you go back before that though, they seemed like to be a lot more promising of a team even before Jimmy Butler. I think what I would have done if I was them was keep JJ Redick, have never traded for Butler so that you have Saric and Covington still, and then still trade Landry Shamet for Tobias Harris because I think he's a definite upgrade, but don't sign him to a max contract. Sign him to slightly below the max, like instead of $35 million annually, what about just like 30 or 28 or 29 million annually? That would have been a lot better for them. If that would have been the case, the core of this team would have been Simmons, Redick. You could have then had Covington, Tobias Harris, and Embiid with Dario Saric as your 6th man. And to me, that's a much better team than what they have now. Because what they really need is the spacing players. Redick, Saric, Covington, and Harris can all space it really great. And like Josh Richardson and Horford are average at it. So to me, those guys just weren't what they really needed, and they were just trying to like correct a really bad situation. And that in the first place, they just traded for Jimmy because it seemed like a good idea. Like bringing in an all-star in their prime, that can't be a bad thing. Well, because of the spacing limitations that already existed, unless Jimmy shoots 40% from 3, it kind of is troubling. But and also, they banked on acing all of their draft picks, and if you look at it, they had Nerlens Noel, they had Embiid, they had Okafor, Simmons, and Fultz. Basically 5 high-profile draft picks that they were planning on banking on, and 2 of them worked out. And even those 2 collectively have missed 3 full seasons out of 10 that they could have played. So that's a lot of time missed for those 2 key pieces. And for the rest, they basically released Okafor. I believe they traded Nerlens Noel for cash, but he was also on a rookie deal, so like that's pointless to trade like a guy for like $3 million cash. Let's see here. They basically traded Fultz for a dude making little money on an expiring contract, so they traded him for like nothing. Let's see here. So they basically traded like all those guys that flopped. They traded them for nothing at the same time, which is not a great return. So they basically had 5 terrible seasons from 13 to 18 to net them Simmons and Embiid. And it's not like that's bad. Like that's actually a really good core to start a championship team with. It's just that with the situation they put themselves in, they could have had so much more. Like in 2013, they could have had I don't know who, but that was actually a pretty mediocre draft. But they could have had somebody better than Noel. In 2015, there were better players on the board than Okafor. 2017, Jason Tatum, anybody? Or if not Jason Tatum, just somebody else. Even Lonzo Ball would have been better than Markelle Fultz, honestly, if they just would have taken him. There were plenty of good options. Lauri Markkanen was on the board around there. He could have been a great spacer for the team. There were plenty of options. But that being said, this is a brief history of why Philly's kind of toiled their future away. And are they still a contender? Yeah, but are they nearly as close to a championship as they thought they'd be? No way. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.